In a vast tapestry of galactic civilization, where 1,000 species had found their place among the stars, one truth remained absolute. Humans were the anomaly. Not because they were the strongest, the smartest, or the most technologically advanced. They were none of these things, but they were the only species that had ever looked a Kethran royal guard in the eyes and growled back. The Galactic Academy had stood for 3 millennia as the pinnacle of interspecies education, where the brightest minds from across the galaxy came to learn diplomacy, science, and the delicate art of coexistence. Its halls had witnessed the signing of peace treaties, the birth of revolutionary technologies, and the careful dance of 1,000 cultures learning to share the same space. What it had never witnessed was a 17-year-old human girl named Maya, Chun staring down Zexhai, the most feared Kethran in the Academy, her lips curled back to reveal her teeth in the most primitive, most terrifying expression any civilized being could imagine. A human smile. This is the story of how one moment of defiance shattered 3,000 years of galactic hierarchy, how a girl from a backwater planet became the catalyst for a revolution that would reshape the very foundations of interstellar society, and how the galaxy learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't a weapon or a warship. Sometimes it's just a human who refuses to back down. The Academy fell silent that day. But before the echoes faded, the galaxy would never be the same. Maya Chun had learned 3 important things in her first month at the Galactic Academy. First, that humans were considered barely above animals by most galactic species. Second, that keeping your head down and your mouth shut was the key to survival. And third, that the cafeteria's attempt at Earth food tasted like recycled air filters mixed with regret. She was contemplating this last fact while picking at what the menu optimistically called pizza when a conversation at the next table caught her attention. Not because she was eavesdropping in a dining hall filled with beings who communicated through everything from subsonic growls to bioluminescent patterns. Privacy was a luxury no one really had. The human colony on Kepler 442b has been struggling with their atmospheric processors, said Veltar, a tall, graceful Altarian whose silver skin shimmered with each word. Her voice carried the musical quality that made her species such natural diplomats. Perhaps we should offer assistance? Humanitarian aid? The response came from Zexhai, and Maya felt her spine stiffen at the sound. The Kethran's voice was like gravel being ground under steel wheels, each word deliberate and sharp. Waste of resources. If the humans cannot maintain their own primitive technology, perhaps they should reconsider their expansion into space. Maya's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She could feel heat building in her chest. Not anger exactly, but something deeper and more primal. Around the galaxy, humans had a reputation for being emotional, unpredictable, barely civilized. She'd been working so hard to prove them wrong. But surely, Veltar continued, her diplomatic training evident in her careful tone, the Galactic Council's charter requires us to provide aid to struggling colonies. The humans may be new to space travel, but they are members of the galactic community. Zexai's laugh was like breaking glass. It wasn't just the sound. Maya had heard Kethran's laugh before. It was the way every other conversation in their section of the dining hall stopped. The way beings from a dozen different species suddenly found their meals fascinating. The way the very air seemed to grow thick with unspoken tension. Members, Zexai stood, and Maya was reminded why the Kethrans had been the galaxy's premier warriors for over 2 millennia. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his muscular frame covered in the distinctive gray-blue fur that marked his species. But it was his eyes that made Maya's breath catch. Yellow, with pupils that dilated and contracted independent of the lighting, constantly focused and predatory. The humans are pets, Veltar. Useful, perhaps, in the same way a trained animal might be useful, but hardly worthy of the same consideration as civilized species. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Maya could feel dozens of eyes turning toward her, the only human in this section of the dining hall. She was suddenly, acutely aware of her own appearance. short by galactic standards at 5.5 feet, her black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing the standard academy uniform that somehow managed to look rumpled even when freshly cleaned. She looked, she realized with burning clarity, exactly like what Zexai had just called her, a pet. The humans have made remarkable progress considering their recent introduction to galactic society, Veltar said, but her voice had lost some of its earlier conviction. Their colony ships are quite ingenious, and their terraforming techniques show promise. Techniques they learned from us, Zexai replied, his yellow eyes now fixed directly on Maya. She could feel the weight of his gaze like a physical thing, pressing down on her shoulders, testing her. Everything they have, they were given. Their ships, their technology, their medicine, all of it handed to them by species who had mastered these arts while humans were still painting pictures on cave walls. The heat in Maya's chest was spreading now, warming her face, making her hands tremble slightly. She knew she should look away, should pretend she hadn't heard, should be the good little human who knew her place in the galactic hierarchy. That's what humans did. They survived by being useful, by being grateful, by never pushing back against the casual cruelties that came with being the newest, weakest species in known space. And yet, Zexai continued, his voice growing louder, carrying across the dining hall. They act as if they belong here, as if their crude emotions and primitive instincts have any place among civilized beings. Look at this one now. He gestured toward Maya with one clawed hand. You can see it in her eyes. The animal rage, the barely controlled violence. This is what humans truly are beneath their polite words and borrowed technologies. Maya stood up. The motion was fluid, controlled, but there was something about it that made the entire dining hall go quiet. It wasn't dramatic. She simply placed her hands on the table, pushed back her chair, and rose to her feet. But in that simple action, every being present suddenly remembered something they had tried very hard to forget. Humans were predators. You're right, Maya said, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent dining hall. We are emotional. We are primitive. And we are violent. She turned to face Zexai fully, and the Kethrin's ears flattened against his head, an unconscious response to a perceived threat. But there's one thing you forgot to mention. She took a step toward his table. Then another. Around them, beings who had been eating, talking, studying, now sat frozen, watching this impossible confrontation unfold. A human, small, young, barely out of her species equivalent of childhood, was walking directly toward a Kethrin royal guard. We're also really, really good at being all of those things. Zexai's lips pulled back, revealing fangs that could tear through steel. The sound that emerged from his throat was something between a growl and a hiss, a challenge that had sent smaller species fleeing for cover across the galaxy for thousands of years. Maya stopped 3 feet away from him and smiled. It wasn't a polite smile, or a diplomatic smile, or even a friendly smile. It was the smile of something that had climbed to the top of its food chain through sheer, bloody-minded determination to survive. It was the smile of a species that had looked at a hostile universe and decided it wanted to be part of it anyway. It was the smile of every human ancestor who had faced down a saber-toothed tiger, a cave bear, or an enemy army, and decided that dying on their feet was better than living on their knees. And then Maya did something that no being in the history of the Galactic Academy had ever done. She growled back. It wasn't a sophisticated sound. It didn't have the harmonic complexity of a Kethrin war cry or the subsonic power of a Graxian threat display. It was just a low, rumbling sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her chest, something primal and utterly alien to the civilized ears around her. But it was unmistakably a challenge. The dining hall had gone so quiet that Maya could hear the hum of the air recyclers. 300 beings from across the galaxy sat in perfect, stunned silence as a teenage human girl and a Kethrin warrior faced each other across a space that suddenly felt like a battlefield. Zexai's yellow eyes dilated to pinpricks. His powerful frame tensed, muscles bunching under his fur. For a moment that stretched like eternity, Maya thought he might actually attack her. She could see the calculation in his predator's gaze, the warrior's assessment of threat and response. But then something else flickered across his features, something that might have been confusion or possibly respect. "Impossible," he whispered, so quietly that only Maya could hear him. "Kethrans do not retreat from lesser species." "Then it's a good thing I'm not asking you to retreat," Maya replied, her voice equally soft but carrying a steel edge that made several nearby beings flinch. "I'm asking you to remember that lesser is a matter of perspective." She took one more step forward, closing the distance between them to less than 2 feet. At this range, she had to crane her neck back to meet his eyes, but her gaze never wavered. "You want to know what makes humans dangerous, HFY?" She used his name deliberately, familiarly, in a way that no non-Kethran had ever dared. "It's not our technology or our ships or our weapons. It's the fact that we don't know when we're supposed to give up." Around them, the silence had taken on a quality that Maya would later recognize as historic. This was the kind of moment that would be talked about in whispers for years, analyzed in xenopsychology classes, and probably result in several strongly worded diplomatic notes. But in that moment, all Maya cared about was the way Zexhai's ears had begun to slowly rise from their flattened position against his head. "You said humans are animals," she continued, her smile never wavering. "You're absolutely right. We are. But here's the thing about animals, especially human animals. We're pack hunters. And right now, there are about 12 billion of my packs spread across 47 worlds, all of them just as emotional, just as primitive, and just as violent as I am." She paused, letting that sink in. "So, the next time you want to discuss the Kepler colony's atmospheric processors, maybe you should remember that those barely civilized humans you're talking about, they're my family. And I really don't like it when people threaten my family." The last word came out as barely more than a whisper, but it carried across the dining hall like a physical force. Maya held Zexhai's gaze for another long moment, then turned and walked back to her table. She picked up her tray, disposed of her barely touched meal, and walked out of the dining hall with the measured stride of someone who had absolutely nothing to prove. Behind her, 300 beings slowly began to breathe again. But Zexhai remained standing exactly where he was, staring at the door through which Maya had just walked, his warrior's mind trying to process what had just happened. In his entire life, no being had ever challenged him so directly and then simply walked away. It was unprecedented. It was impossible. It was magnificent. For the first time in his 3 centuries of life, Zexhai began to understand why the galaxy's military strategists had started paying very close attention to this strange species from the 3rd planet of an unremarkable star. Across the dining hall, Veltar slowly set down her eating implement, her silver skin cycling through colors that indicated deep contemplation. "Fascinating," she murmured to herself. "Absolutely fascinating." The next day, Maya found a note in her dormitory message slot. It was written in the flowing script of High Kethran, a language she had been studying but barely understood. But she managed to translate enough to understand the basic message. "Your challenge has been acknowledged. The response will come when you are ready to receive it." It was signed with the formal seal of the Royal Guards. Maya stared at the note for a long time, then carefully folded it and placed it in her desk drawer. Through her dormitory window, she could see the sprawling complex of the Galactic Academy, with its gleaming spires and flowing architecture designed to accommodate beings from 100 different worlds. Somewhere in those buildings, discussions were taking place that would echo across the galaxy. Diplomatic instructors were revising their curriculum to include new case studies in human behavior. Military strategists were updating their assessments of human psychological warfare capabilities. And in the highest levels of the Academy administration, very serious beings were having very serious conversations about whether humanity's membership in galactic society might need to be reconsidered. But Maya didn't know any of that yet. All she knew was that she had done something unprecedented, something that went against everything she had been taught about how humans should behave in galactic society. And for the first time since arriving at the academy, she felt like she belonged there. Outside her window, the galaxy's twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, new opportunities to prove that humanity deserved its place among the stars. Maya smiled. Not the predator's grin she had shown HFY, but something warmer and more hopeful. She was looking forward to it. 3 days after the incident in the dining hall, Maya discovered that fame was considerably less enjoyable than she had imagined as a child. It started with the stairs. Everywhere she went on campus, conversations stopped and heads turned. Some beings watched her with curiosity, others with fear, and a few with what might have been admiration. But all of them watched, and Maya was beginning to understand why her grandmother had always said that being the center of attention was more curse than blessing. She was trying to ignore the latest group of gawkers, a cluster of young Zephyrians whose bioluminescent patches were flickering in patterns that her universal translator helpfully informed her meant dangerous and unpredictable when Professor Carthex intercepted her on the way to interspecies relations class. Miss Chun, the elderly Venusian, said, his forearms gesturing in what Maya had learned was either distress or excitement, sometimes both. A word, if you please. Maya suppressed a sigh. Professor Carthex was one of the few instructors who had never treated her differently for being human, but the last few days had strained even his professional neutrality. Professor, if this is about the dining hall incident— Oh, it most certainly is about the dining hall incident, Carthex interrupted, his primary arms crossing while his secondary arms continued their agitated gesturing. Do you have any idea what you've done? Maya felt her stomach drop. She had been dreading this conversation since the moment she walked out of that dining hall. I defended myself and my species from unprovoked insults. According to Galactic Academy Regulation 247C, all students have the right to respond to verbal aggression with Miss Chun. Carthex's voice carried the gentle patience of someone who had spent centuries dealing with young beings who thought they understood the galaxy. You didn't just respond to verbal aggression. You challenged a Kethran Royal Guard to single combat. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. A what? The growl, Carthex explained, leading her toward his office. In Kethran culture, a return growl is a formal challenge. By responding to HFY's threat display with your own, you essentially declared your intention to settle the matter through ritualized combat. Maya stopped walking. Around them, the flow of student traffic continued, but she felt suddenly isolated, as if she were trapped in a bubble of her own making. Professor, I had no idea. I was angry, and I reacted. I didn't mean to. Of course you didn't, Carthex said gently, which is precisely what makes this situation so remarkable. He palmed the entry sensor to his office, and the door dilated open with a soft hiss. The space beyond was typically Venusian. High ceilings, flowing curves, and air that tasted faintly of ozone and growing things. But what caught Maya's attention was the figure seated in one of the guest chairs. HFY rose as they entered, and Maya felt her breathing quicken involuntarily. The Kethran looked exactly as imposing as he had in the dining hall, but there was something different about his posture. More formal, somehow. More respectful. Miss Chun, he said, inclining his head in what Maya recognized as a formal Kethran greeting. I thank you for agreeing to meet. I didn't exactly agree, Maya said warily. Professor Carthex just told me I accidentally challenged you to a fight. Are you here to kill me? The question hung in the air for a moment before HFY did something that Maya would have sworn was impossible. He laughed. Not the harsh, mocking sound from the dining hall, but genuine amusement. No, Miss Chun, I'm not here to kill you. His yellow eyes fixed on hers, and Maya saw something there she hadn't expected, curiosity. I am here to understand you. Professor Carthex settled behind his desk, his forearms moving in complex patterns as he called up files on his holographic display. The situation, Miss Chun, is this. By issuing a challenge, You have placed yourself in a rather unique position in Kethran society. Technically, you are now considered a warrior. But I'm not a warrior, Maya protested. I'm a 17-year-old xenobiology student from Ohio. I've never even been in a real fight. And yet, Zexai said quietly, you faced me without flinching when I displayed aggression. You matched my challenge with your own. You showed no fear. He paused, his head tilting slightly in a gesture that reminded Maya uncomfortably of a large predator studying its prey. Tell me, Miss Chun, were you afraid? The honest answer was yes. She had been terrified, standing that close to 8 feet of trained warrior. Watching those predators' eyes track her every movement, she had been more frightened than she had ever been in her life. But there had been something else, too. Something that had burned hotter than the fear. Yes, she admitted, but I was angrier than I was afraid. Zexai's ears pricked forward, a sign of intense interest in Kethran body language. Anger over fear. Yes, that is the way of warriors. He looked at Professor Carthex. She cannot refuse the challenge now that it has been made. According to Kethran law, no, Carthex replied. However, there are alternatives to traditional single combat. Maya felt a surge of hope. Alternatives? The challenge of understanding, Zexai said before Carthex could respond. Instead of testing your body against mine, you would be tested on your knowledge of Kethran culture, history, and military tactics. It is considered an acceptable substitute for those who... He paused, clearly searching for diplomatic phrasing. For those who will be squashed like bugs in actual combat, Maya finished. I was going to say for those whose strengths lie in intellectual rather than physical prowess, Zexai replied. But your translation is more accurate. Despite everything, Maya found herself smiling. How long do I have to prepare? 7 days, Carthex said. The challenge will take place during the monthly Academy Council meeting, with representatives from all member species present. Maya's smile faded. In front of everyone, Miss Chun, Professor Carthex said gently, you need to understand the implications of what has happened here. Humans have been members of galactic society for less than 50 years. In that time, they have been seen as useful but ultimately inferior, technologically dependent on other species, emotionally unstable, lacking the sophistication for true galactic citizenship. But you challenged one of the galaxy's premier warrior species, Zexai continued, and you did so instinctively, without calculation or consideration for the consequences. That speaks to something deeper than mere emotion or primitive aggression. Maya sank into the remaining chair, her mind racing. You're saying this isn't just about me anymore. This hasn't been about you since the moment you growled back, Carthex confirmed. Every species in the galaxy is watching to see what happens next. If you fail the challenge, it will be seen as confirmation that humans are indeed inferior. But if you succeed, if I succeed, Zexai leaned forward, and Maya caught a glimpse of something that might have been excitement in his predator's eyes. If you succeed, Miss Chun, you will have proven that humans are capable of understanding and respecting the deepest traditions of other species. You will have demonstrated that your people can learn, adapt, and earn their place among us through merit rather than charity. The weight of it settled on Maya's shoulders like a physical thing. The future of human galactic relations, resting on her ability to pass a test about a species she barely understood. No pressure, she muttered. Indeed, Zexai agreed, completely missing her sarcasm. The pressure will be immense. Over the next week, Maya discovered that intensive studying took on an entirely different character when failure meant potential diplomatic incident. She spent 18 hours a day buried in Kethran texts, learning about their history of conquest and honor, their complex social hierarchies, their military philosophies that had shaped galactic politics for millennia. But it was the personal study sessions with Zexai that proved most enlightening. Your people fascinate me, he admitted during their 3rd evening together in the Academy Library. They had been working through the complexities of Kethran battle formations when he suddenly looked up from his datapad. In all my studies of galactic species, I have never encountered anything quite like human behavior patterns. Maya looked up from her notes on the siege of Velcura, grateful for the break. Her head was swimming with dates and battle tactics and the elaborate honor codes that governed Kethran society. How so? Most species, when they encounter a superior force, respond predictably. They submit, they flee, or they attempt to bargain from a position of weakness. Zexai's yellow eyes studied her intently. Humans seem to have evolved a fourth option. They get stubborn. Maya laughed, the sound echoing softly in the nearly empty library. My grandmother used to say that stubbornness was the secret to human survival. When life gets hard, we just refuse to die. It is more than that, Zexai insisted. I have been reviewing human military history since our encounter. Do you know what I discovered? Maya shook her head. Your species has a pattern of achieving victory through what other species would consider defeat. At Thermopylae, 300 Spartans held off an army of thousands, knowing they would die. At the Alamo, a small group of defenders chose death over surrender. On Earth, during what you call World War II, entire cities continue to fight, even under siege. We're good at lost causes, Maya agreed. Probably not the best trait for galactic diplomacy. On the contrary, Zexai said, it may be exactly what galactic society needs. Before Maya could ask what he meant, they were interrupted by the soft chime of an incoming message. Zexai's ears flattened as he read whatever had appeared on his personal communicator. What is it? Maya asked. Political complications, Zexai replied grimly. There are some among my people who believe that allowing a human to take the challenge of understanding sets a dangerous precedent. They argue that the challenge should be withdrawn. Maya felt her heart sink. Can they do that? They can try. There will be a formal debate among the Kethran delegation tomorrow morning. Zexai's claws extended slightly, a sign of agitation. I will speak for you, but there are powerful voices raised against this precedent. What precedent? Zexai was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that Maya was only beginning to understand. The precedent of treating humans as equals. That night, Maya lay awake in her dormitory bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything that was happening. Through her window, she could see the lights of other academy buildings, each one housing students from across the galaxy, beings who represented hundreds of different worlds, cultures, and ways of thinking. And somewhere in those buildings, powerful figures were debating whether her species deserved the same respect as everyone else. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had come to the academy to study alien life, to understand the rich diversity of galactic civilization. Instead, she had become a symbol in a conflict she barely understood, representing her entire species in a challenge that could reshape humanity's place in the galaxy. Her personal communicator chimed softly. A message from her parents back on Earth, just a routine check-in, asking about her classes and her friends and whether she was eating enough. They had no idea their daughter was about to become either a diplomatic triumph or a galactic embarrassment. Maya smiled despite everything. Her grandmother had been right about stubbornness being the secret to human survival. But maybe it could be something more than that. Maybe it could be the secret to human success. She rolled over and pulled up her study materials on her bedside display. Tomorrow would bring political debates and formal challenges and the weight of an entire species' expectations. But tonight, she had Kethran military history to memorize. After all, Maya-chan had never been very good at giving up. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Academy had been designed to accommodate representatives from every known species, and Maya had always found it beautiful in an alien sort of way. The curved walls seemed to flow like water. The ceiling opened to a holographic display of the galaxy itself, and the seating arrangements had been carefully engineered to account for everything from the massive bulk of Graxian delegates to the delicate aerial perches preferred by the Stellar Ray Collective. Today, however, the hall felt less like a monument to galactic cooperation and more like a coliseum. Maya sat in the designated challenge space, a circular platform at the center of the hall. Try not to think about the fact that every seat around her was occupied. Word of the challenge of understanding had spread far beyond the Academy. Representatives from major galactic governments were present, along with military observers, diplomatic attaches, and what appeared to be most of the Academy student body. All here to watch a 17-year-old human either prove her species' worth or confirm their inferiority. No pressure at all. The challenger will state her name and world of origin, announced Director Velnash, the Academy's Altarian administrator. Her musical voice carried easily through the hall's acoustics. Maya stood, grateful that her legs felt steady. Maya Chun of Earth, Sol System, representing humanity in the Galactic Alliance. A ripple of whispered translations swept through the assembly. Even with universal translators, the formal phrasing carried different implications in different cultures. By stating that she represented humanity rather than just herself, Maya had elevated the stakes considerably. The challenge will state his name and clan affiliation, Director Velnash continued. Zexai rose from his position across the platform. In full ceremonial armor, he was even more imposing than usual. 8 feet of controlled power wrapped in the deep blue and silver that marked his rank as a royal guard. Zexai of the Third Talon, blood heir to the war leader Kexmoth, sworn to the eternal honor of the Kethran Empire. The formal introductions continued with increasing complexity as each participant recited their lineage and achievements. Maya began to understand why galactic diplomacy took so long. By the time everyone had properly introduced themselves, most conflicts would resolve through sheer exhaustion. Finally, Director Velnash called for silence. Let the challenge of understanding begin. The first phase was straightforward enough. Basic questions about Kethran history, culture, and social structure. Maya had spent the week memorizing this material, and she found herself settling into a rhythm. The founding of the first Kethran Empire, the structure of their military hierarchy, the significance of the war songs in their cultural development. But as the questions progressed, they became more complex, more nuanced. This wasn't just testing her knowledge, it was testing her understanding of how that knowledge fit together, how it shaped Kethran behavior and decision-making. Explain the significance of the Battle of Velkara in modern Kethran military doctrine, Director Velnash announced. Maya took a deep breath. This was one of the topics she and Zexai had discussed extensively, but not because it was in any of her study materials. She had asked about it because she couldn't understand why the Kethrans considered a victory when they had technically lost. The Battle of Velkara represents the fundamental Kethran principle that honor is more important than survival, Maya began. When the Third Fleet was surrounded by superior enemy forces, they had 2 choices: surrender and live, or fight and die with honor. They chose to fight. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. This wasn't the standard academic answer. The tactical result was the complete destruction of the Third Fleet, Maya continued. But the strategic result was that the enemy was forced to commit so many resources to the battle that their main advance was delayed by months. The Third Fleet bought time for the Kethran homeworld to prepare its defenses, and their sacrifice allowed the Empire to ultimately achieve victory in a larger war. She paused, looking directly at Zexai. But more than that, the Battle of Velkara established that Kethrans would rather die fighting than live in submission. That reputation has been their greatest weapon for centuries. Enemies think twice about attacking Kethrans, not because they're afraid of losing, but because they know the Kethrans will make victory cost more than defeat. The silence that followed was different from the earlier quiet. This wasn't the polite attention of a formal examination. This was the focused stillness of beings realizing they were witnessing something unexpected. Zexai's yellow eyes never left Maya's face, but she caught the slight forward tilt of his ears, approval in Kethran body language. The questions continued, growing more complex, more abstract. They moved from historical facts to philosophical principles, from military tactics to cultural values. And with each answer, Maya began to understand something that her week of intensive study had only hinted at. This wasn't really about testing her knowledge of Kethran culture. This was about testing whether humans could truly understand other species, not just their facts and figures, but their hearts and souls. Final question, Director Velnash announced. Given your understanding of Kethran culture and values, explain why Warrior Zexhai chose to offer you the challenge of understanding rather than traditional single combat. Maya felt her breath catch. This wasn't in any of her study materials. This wasn't something she could have memorized or rehearsed. This required her to understand not just Kethran culture, but Zexhai himself. She looked at the massive warrior across the platform, remembering their conversations over the past week, remembering the curiosity in his eyes when he asked about human stubbornness, remembering his comment about humans being what galactic society needed. Because, Maya said slowly, traditional single combat would have proven nothing. Another ripple of surprise through the assembly. If Zexhai had fought me physically, there were only two possible outcomes. Either he would win easily, confirming existing prejudices about human weakness, or he would have to hold back to avoid seriously injuring me, which would dishonor both of us. Maya's voice grew stronger as the logic clarified in her mind. But the challenge of understanding offers a third option. She turned to address the full assembly, speaking not just to Director Velnash, but to every representative present. By offering this challenge, Zexhai created an opportunity for humanity to prove our worth without requiring him to compromise his honor as a warrior. If I fail, it confirms that humans aren't ready for true equality in galactic society. But if I succeed, Maya paused, suddenly understanding the full scope of what was happening here. If I succeed, it proves that humans are capable of growth, that we can learn, adapt, and earn our place among you not through charity or pity, but through genuine understanding and respect for who you are. The silence stretched for long moments before Director Velnash spoke. The challenge has been completed. The assembly will now hear the judgment of the challenged. Zexhai stepped forward, and Maya felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Everything, humanity's future in galactic society, her own standing at the Academy, the carefully balanced relationships between dozens of species, all of it depended on the next words from the mouth of a warrior she had met less than 2 weeks ago. I, Zexhai of the Third Talon, acknowledge that the challenger has met the requirements of the challenge of understanding. His formal, ceremonial voice carried clearly through the hall. She has demonstrated knowledge of Kethran history, comprehension of our cultural values, and insight into our strategic thinking. Maya felt relief flood through her, followed immediately by confusion. Zexhai wasn't finished. But more than this, he continued, she has shown something that no being in this assembly has shown before. She has shown that humans do not merely study other species. They seek to truly understand them, not for conquest or advantage, but for the simple purpose of connection. He turned to face Maya directly, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a warmth she had never heard from him before. In my centuries of life, I have fought beside many warriors from many species. I have respected their courage, admired their skill, honored their sacrifice. But I have never met a being who sought to understand my people simply because she believed we were worth understanding. Zexhai moved closer until he was standing directly in front of Maya. Then, to the absolute shock of everyone present, he knelt. Maya, Chun of Earth, he said formally, you have not only met the challenge of understanding, you have exceeded it. You have shown me that true strength lies not in the ability to defeat others, but in the wisdom to learn from them. He rose, but his yellow eyes remained fixed on hers. And you have taught me that humans may be the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of your capacity for violence, but because of your capacity for growth. The explosion of sound that followed was unlike anything Maya had ever experienced. Dozens of species, each with their own ways of expressing approval, erupted simultaneously. Kethrans roared, Altarians chimed in harmonious patterns, Graxians thundered with their massive voices, and through it all, Maya could hear the distinctly human sound of applause from the scattered Earth students present. But louder than any of it was the silence that came after, the moment when every being in the assembly realized that something fundamental had just changed. Director Velnash stepped forward, her musical voice somehow carrying over the chaos. By the ancient laws of challenge and the witness judgment of the challenged, I declare that humanity has earned the right to full equality within galactic society. Let this day be remembered as the moment when Earth's children prove themselves worthy not through conquest, but through understanding. Later, after the formal ceremonies had concluded and the crowds had dispersed, Maya found herself alone with Zexhai in the quiet corridor outside the assembly hall. The massive warrior was back to his normal uniform, but something about his posture had changed. He seemed more relaxed, more approachable. "I have a confession," he said without preamble. Maya looked up at him warily. After everything that had happened today, she wasn't sure she was ready for more surprises. When I first spoke those words in the dining hall, I believed them. I thought humans were inferior, useful perhaps, but ultimately lacking the depth and sophistication for true galactic citizenship. And now? Zexai's laugh was warm, genuine. Now I realized that I was measuring you by the wrong standard. I was looking for sophistication when I should have been looking for sincerity. I was seeking complexity when I should have valued compassion. He paused, looking out through the corridor's viewports at the stars beyond. Your people have a saying, I believe, don't judge a book by its cover. We have a similar concept in Kethran culture, but we had forgotten to apply it to ourselves. We saw humans as simple, primitive, emotional, and we failed to understand that sometimes the simple truth is the most profound one of all. What truth is that? Zexhai turned back to Maya, and in his predator's eyes, she saw something that would have been impossible 2 weeks ago. Friendship. That the strongest beings are not those who never fall, but those who always get back up. And humanity, Maya-chan, has been getting back up for far longer than the rest of us have been paying attention. Maya felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she truly felt like she was home. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now," Zexai said with a grin that revealed far too many teeth to be truly reassuring. "You finish your xenobiology studies, graduate with honors, and probably end up changing how the entire galaxy thinks about interspecies relations." "No pressure," Maya said, echoing her words from a week ago. "No pressure at all," Zexai agreed, and this time he understood her perfectly. As they walked together through the corridors of the academy, Maya caught sight of their reflection in the polished windows, a small human girl and a massive alien warrior, walking side by side as equals. It was an image that would have been impossible just 2 weeks ago. But then, again, Maya was beginning to understand that impossible was just another word for hasn't happened yet. And humans, she was learning, were very good at making the impossible happen. The academy fell silent that day, but only for a moment. What followed was a symphony of voices, species, and ideas coming together in ways that had never been attempted before. It was the sound of a galaxy learning to see humanity not as charity cases or primitive cousins, but as equals. It was the sound of the future being born, one growl at a time.